folks, that towards the end there were Templars who were of actual Palestinian birth, who would have every opportunity of absorbing the unorthodox beliefs of the many schools of a magico-religious nature which existed in the area. The Grand Master Philippe of Nablus, in 1167, for instance, was a Syrian, and many crusaders were Levantine lords, whatever their original blood, speaking Arabic with perfection. It was in 1162 that the Magna Carta of the order was obtained by the Templars. The bull Omne Datum Optimum, often described as the keystone of their power. And through this instrument they were able to consolidate their authority and preserve their secrets against intrusion. They were to find, too, that it did much to excite the envy of their opponents. Pope Adrian IV had died. The two rival popes were elected, Alexander III by the Sicilian group and Victor III by the imperial party. At first the Templars acknowledged Victor, but in 1161 they switched their allegiance to Alexander. There was probably some sort of secret arrangement behind this, for by January 7th of the following year the famous bull was issued. By the terms of this document, the Templars were released from all spiritual ties except to the Holy See itself. They were permitted to have special burial grounds in their own houses. They could have chaplains of their own. They had no tithes to pay, which in that day and age was miraculous, and were allowed to receive tithes, which was absolutely incredible. Nobody who had once entered the order could leave it, except to join one with a stricter discipline. The stage, dear listeners, was set for clerical hatred of the Templars and Hospitallers, who had similar privileges, and in fact were one and the same, and still are today, although the advantages to the Pope from the combined support of these two orders could hardly be overestimated. In 1184 an incident occurred which inspired a great deal of distrust of the order, although the rarity of its occurrence should have underlined the fact that it was nothing of much consequence. You see, the English knight Robert of St. Albans left the Templars, became a Moslem, and led an army for Saladin against Jerusalem, then in the hands of the Franks. The charge against the Templars that they were secret Mussulmans or allies of the Saracens does not seem borne out by the fact that Saladin accused them of treacherous truce breaking and other crimes, and unlike his usual chivalrous self, took a solemn oath that he would execute such Templar captives as he could obtain as, quote, beyond the limits of Islam and infidelity alike, unquote. Nor did they make any attempts to invoke any religious bond with Saladin when they were captured, as we know from the Arabic Life of Saladin, written contemporaneously by his secretary, Qadi Yusuf. Strong evidence of this is given in the events which followed the terrible Battle of Hattin. 2 years before, Saladin had made a pact with the assassins that they would give him a free hand to continue his holy war against the Franks, which we discussed on an earlier program. On July the 1st, 1187, he captured Tiberias. He attacked nearby Hattin at dawn on Friday, July the 3rd. 30,000 Christians were captured, including the king of Jerusalem. No Templar, not one, is mentioned in the detailed Arab account as asking for mercy on religious or any other grounds, although all knew that Saladin had issued a war cry, quote, "Come to death, Templars," unquote. The Grand Master Gerard of Rydfort and several other knights were among those taken. Saladin offered them their lives if they would see the light of the true faith. Well, according to history, none accepted, and all these knights were beheaded except, admittedly, the Templar Grand Master. Could it be that he did accept the true faith, or the light of the true faith, as Saladin had put it? A non-Templar, Reginald of Chatillon, tried to invoke the sacred code of Arab hospitality, and other crusaders claimed that they were Muslims and were spared. None of them were Templars or Hospitallers. Reginald and the Templars collectively were sentenced to death for breaking the truth and the war crime of killing unarmed pilgrims to Mecca. Arab accounts include only a few references which could be construed as indicating any collusion with the Christian army. One says that on the Friday at midday, and the battle lasted for 2 days, Sultan Saladin issued the attack cry to be passed along the Saracen host, quote, "On for Islam," unquote, at which the striped banner of the Templars was raised. And the Emir Lion of the Faith said, "Are those Sultan Saladin Yusuf's allies of whom I have heard from the reconnaissance men?" Well, this cannot be regarded as anything at all conclusive. The only other reference is to a body of Templars who went over to the Saracen side and whose supposed descendants survive to this day as the Salabiya, which means Crusader tribe, in North Arabia. This engagement, folks, spelt the end of real Western power in Palestine for over 700 years, although it did stimulate the unsuccessful Third Crusade. Although the Templars and some other Crusaders were still in the Holy Land, they had lost almost all of their possessions there. But in the West lay the real seat of their power. At this time, their European possessions numbered over 7,000 estates and foundations. Although principally concentrated in France and England, they had extensive properties in Portugal, Castile, Leon, Scotland, and Ireland, Germany, Italy, and Sicily. When Jerusalem was lost, their headquarters were transferred to Paris. This building, like all their branch churches, was known as the Temple. It was here that the French king Philip the Fair took refuge in 1306 to escape a civil commotion. It is said that this visit gave him his first insight into the real wealth of the order. Now remember, the wealth was not for the members, for they practiced the first true socialism, international socialism, or communism. The fabulous treasures which his host showed him, giving the bankrupt monarch the idea to plunder the knights on the pretext that they were dominated by heresies. Philippe the Fair was not entirely without some grounds for attacking the Templars. For in 1208 we find Pope Innocent III, a great friend of the order, censuring them publicly for, quote, causing their churches to be thrown open for Mass to be said every day with loud ringing of bells, bearing the cross of Christ on their breast, but not caring to follow his doctrines which forbid giving offense to the little ones who believe in him. Following the doctrines of demons, they affixed their cross of the order upon the breast of every kind of scoundrel, asserting that whoever, by paying 2 or 3 pence a year, became one of their fraternity, could not, even if interdicted, be deprived of Christian burial. And thus they themselves, being captive to the devil, ceased not to make captive the souls of the faithful, seeking to make alive those whom they knew to be dead. Unquote. The first sign of an attempt to bring some sort of physical restraint upon the Templars came from Henry III of England. For in 1252 he hinted that he might try to seize some of the property of the order. Quote, "You prelates and religious," he said, "especially you Templars and Hospitallers, have so many liberties and charters that your enormous possessions make you rave with pride and haughtiness. What was imprudently given must therefore be prudently revoked, and what was inconsiderately bestowed must be considerately recalled." Unquote. Those were the words of the king. The master of the Templars immediately replied, quote, "What sayest thou, O king? Far be it that thy mouth should utter so disagreeable and silly a word. So long as thou dost exercise justice, thou wilt reign. But if thou infringe it, thou wilt cease to be king." Unquote. Now remember that the Knights Templar at that time were the very first international bankers. They were the wealthiest order, wealthiest group then known in the world, even surpassing the kings of the different countries that existed. And even though the Hospitallers were created before the Knights Templar, eventually the two became the same order, though to the public and to the rulers of Europe they were different orders with different names. The haughty Templars of the 14th century owned land and revenues, gained steadily in honor and importance. They might have had thrones had they wanted them, for such was their power towards the end that banded together